Good evening. The Half-Life 2 Beta. What is it? What would it have been like? And would it have been better than the Half-Life 2 we actually got? It's an argument that has been roaring among nerds like me in the Half-Life community for almost 20 years now. Even just the term Half-Life 2 Beta is a bit controversial in its own right. There technically is no one neat Half-Life 2 Beta build that leaked back in 2003, but rather a giant avalanche of scattered, unsorted server files from all kinds of different periods in the game's long development cycle. This is why certain pockets of the community have for 2 decades maintained that these files should be dubbed the Half-Life 2 leak, and not a Half-Life 2 beta. Right as they may be, the term beta seems to have stuck. I suppose it's simply catchier and cooler sounding. Today, however, I don't want to just talk about the beta leak as you might have seen me do in the past. I want to talk about something a little bit more specific. The creative souls who have tried to finish it. Over the last 2 decades, there have been so many people that have set out to recreate the elusive Half-Life 2 beta. Dozens of projects by dozens of teams across the globe, all trying to answer, what would this iconic game look like if it had been finished in that otherworldly, nascent form we've only seen in the concept art. Some of these projects I've never gotten around to trying before. Others I haven't touched in what feels like a lifetime. And each of them actually stand to teach us a surprising amount about the game's history. So today, I want to explore some of the different projects that have emerged from the Half-Life 2 beta modding community. And I want to figure out just how different were the original drafts of this game, and has anyone actually gotten close to resurrecting the Half-Life 2 we almost got? Missing Information was the first attempt I know of to try and revive the Half-Life 2 beta. It's not the greatest or most complete beta mod, but it does have the most, aura? It has a very cool logo and intro video. In fact, it's impressive how well its branding still holds up because, as far as I'm aware, Missing Information was the very first beta remake mod to emerge after Half-Life 2's final release. You can find Missing Information videos on YouTube that are over 18 years old, from before even the Orange Box came out. The mod was started in 2005 by Gabe's Love Tub, a mod team that also worked on restoring leaked builds of TF2 Invasion. They unfortunately seem to have had a reputation back in the day for being a bit unpleasant. There was once even a forum community comprised entirely of people who didn't like them. The general premise of Missing Information, much like pretty much every beta mod, is to take the interesting, unfinished scenes and chapters that the public caught glimpses of in the 2003 leak and polish them up to the level of quality the final game had. The latest public build is from 2011, but it's a bit broken nowadays. The mod also unfortunately only comes with one fully finished chapter, that being the Hyperborea. Before it was a piece of the story in Portal 2 and Episode 2, the Borealis or Hyperborea was originally planned as a location you would visit in the early drafts of Half-Life 2. And rather than being a time-traveling aperture science experiment that the future of humanity depended on, it was simply a typical research ship belonging to the Combine. The wiki states that Valve began work on the Borealis in 1999, a mere 6 months after the original Half-Life released. It was one of the earliest planned pieces of Half-Life 2's story, and as such is one of the most well-known scrapped locations found in the quote-unquote beta. Early on in development, the Borealis was planned as the original opening chapter of Half-Life 2, but Missing Information shows us a version from later in development, taking place more toward the middle of Gordon's journey. In this iteration of the story, after destroying the air exchange facility, Gordon would have escaped to a coastal shoreline and taken a tugboat to eventually reach the Hyperborea ship. This is where Missing Information picks up, with Gordon's perspective resuming outside the fabled vessel, carrying an ice axe in hand. Climbing aboard the side of the ship, we meet up with an engineer named Odell. This guy has a weirdly interesting history. He was something of an earlier iteration of the Odessa character, and even after the Hyperborea ship was cut, Valve tried to keep him around as a character you would have encountered in the canals. Because of his orange jumpsuit, some people even speculate that he later inspired the Russell character in Half-Life Alyx, and his voice lines were also recorded by Half-Life 1 and 2's lead writer, Mark Laidlaw.
Wondering where you got to. Open up, it's Odell.
Opening a small locker, we get our hands on a new weapon, a flare gun that we'll later be able to use to light enemies on fire with. It's good fun. After Odell pries his way into the ship, it becomes clear something is wrong. Rather than being greeted by anyone, we instead come across ship crew who have been massacred. These are unique character assets, Borealis workers who have Combine insignia on their back. I didn't understand this as a kid, but the idea is that these ship workers were double agents for the Resistance. And by the time we arrive on the ship, their cover has been blown and the Combine have begun massacring them. Odell was apparently hoping to meet up with a crew captain on the ship named Johansson, but the captain is nowhere to be found, most likely disposed of with the rest of his team. We make our way into a radio room and receive a message from Kraken Base, another research base controlled by the Resistance. It was essentially an earlier underwater version of Black Mesa East from the final game.
Hyperborea, come in please. This is Kraken Base. Do you read? Our situation is critical down here. Is anybody up there? We are in serious trouble.
Poor bastards.
With things on the ship as dire as they are, Odell tells us to make our way to the other side of the ship and find a submarine, so we can escape to Kraken Base together and see about helping them. There's something endearing about these cute little animations of Odell descending the steep stairwells of the ship, or welding doors open for us, a bit like the Marines in Opposing Force do. Another item we get our hands on here is the fire extinguisher, which is a novel asset and idea, but if we're being honest with ourselves, Half-Life 2 is not any worse off for scrapping it. Since we have a pistol and Odell doesn't, he sends us ahead to clear our way through the tense, lonely, and slightly claustrophobic ship. Making our way past more dead crewmates, we eventually encounter Combine soldiers, sporting these Killzone-esque Beta-inspired designs and carrying the XM29 OICW. It's a bulky, earlier version of the AR-2 based on a real prototype weapon by H&K, and a certified Beta classic. Unfortunately, its alt-fire green scope mechanic is pretty hideous.
You can't let them take control. If the ship makes its course, Kraken Base is done for.
This bugged, dying ship worker informs us that the Resistance is doomed if we allow the Combine to use the Hyperborea against Kraken Base. So we head topside and advance towards the front of the ship. After making our way to the control pit and clearing out the Combine inside, we see what's left of the main crew. Their bodies and Pepsis scattered all about. I believe this is a callback to a scene in the original Half-Life's On a Rail chapter, where you make your way to the rocket launch center, only to find the Marines have already massacred everybody there. With these soldiers taken out, however, Kraken Base and the Resistance should now be saved. So now we just need to reunite with Odell and get the hell out of this place. In a storage room on the way back, we encounter Stalkers for the first time. Although they weren't fought in official combat until Episode 1, they were originally planned as enemies in base Half-Life 2, and their earlier design we see in Missing Information is a good degree more torturous and horrific looking than the final version. I personally think the final design is more unique and iconic, but the early Stalker is a bit spookier looking. So much so that people have apparently built Half-Life 2 Beta horror ARGs around them. Not sure what that's all about. Anyways, this Stalker encounter is cool because as soon as we step in the room, we feel the ship start rattling and see physics objects go flying everywhere, and it creates this intense, chaotic, disorienting combat sequence that I'm a bit sad we didn't see anything like in the final game. As we look for Odell and his submarine, we see why the ship has started rattling. The Stalkers seem to be tearing shit up. Everything's on fire, and the fire extinguisher is really no help. The Hyperborea is done for. Once we meet back up with Odell, he leads us out to the side of the ship, where we greet a sunny morning sky and finally begin boarding a submarine to make our escape. And that is essentially where the mod ends. The Hyperborea is the only part the Missing Information team seem to have ever polished and released in full, but to be fair, it is pretty damn cool. From this point in the early storyline, Gordon's trip into the Arctic would have ended with him taking this submarine to Kraken Base and visiting a slightly obscure location called the Weather Control Station, before taking a C-130 to fly back into City 17 and crash landing at another cut location called the Skyscraper, or Vertigo. What that basically means is that Half-Life 2 was originally going to have a detour where Gordon fucks off to the Arctic for 15 minutes, then comes back to City 17 by doing 9/11. Truly, the beta was better. Now, there are a few other maps included in Missing Information after the Hyperborea, but they're pretty much all broken and unfinished, and I could hardly get any of them to run nowadays without running into a ton of issues. There's a port of the E3 2003 demonstration, which in my copy consisted of G-Man fucking me with his eyes until the game crashed. There's also an early scrapped coast level from E3 where you explored the Combine Depot, an area only seen from a distance in the final game, but loading this also crashed the game, as did the final rooftop uprising level. None of the patches online I downloaded managed to fix any of these issues, so I guess 15 years of Source Engine updates have not been kind to this mod. The only other map I did manage to get working was the E3 Terminal, an earlier version of the Intro Plaza. You make your way past police bus that you might recognize from the game's promotional material, then head up an elevator zipline thing, catch a view of the weird Beta Citadel design and a couple of rebels smuggling weapons on a rooftop, then you get off and nothing else seems to happen. I think part of the reason people find exploring the beta content so interesting isn't even necessarily the actual intended designs or writing, but rather just because so much of the content you'll find in the files are so bizarre in this way. Weird maps with no rules or polish that very few people have seen, so unfinished that it's easy to completely lose track of what's happening or where the map wants you to go, and all there is to accompany you are these weird, creepy early 2000s video game soundscapes. It doesn't seem to show up anymore, but Missing Information even used to stamp this big, intense-looking red label on your screen whenever you loaded an unfinished map, warning you that what you're playing are stolen Valve files not meant for the public's eyes. It's also interesting to see how many of these ideas wound up being repurposed by Valve later on, the Hyperborea becoming the Borealis, or Odell becoming Odessa, etc. And since Valve showed levels like the Borealis off extensively in magazines and press releases before the game came out, I imagine some players back in the day just found it cathartic to finally experience the levels Valve promised but never delivered. Even today, it's just refreshing to get another taste of classic Valve's amazing trademark atmosphere and setting design. Anyways, regardless of how much missing information served as a gateway to the Half-Life 2 beta mythos and helped fan the flames of a fervent generational love for Half-Life 2's history, Valve has almost always been semi-hostile to beta content, and Gabe's Love Tub may be the biggest victims of this. Despite missing information being among the first games ever accepted via Valve's Steam Greenlight system, and even still having a reserved store page to this day, the mod has been denied an official Steam release. In 2021, 6 years after Valve initially accepted the mod to release on Steam, apparently Steam support changed their tune and told Gabe's Love Tub their game was disallowed from Steam for using illegal content. Now, Valve has no obligation to allow stolen material or really any material on their platform if they don't want to, but stringing these fans along for the better part of 10 years and then slamming the door in their face just seems a little bit cruel to me. Especially when nowadays they evidently have no problem showing off or talking about all this quote stolen material in their own official documentaries. They also recently shut down a highly anticipated Counter-Strike mod 8 years in the making on a whim. What can you do? Missing information is supposedly still in development, but the team behind it have been silent for over 4 years now, so I wouldn't get my hopes up for a full release anytime soon. Regardless though, the mod was a big part of my childhood, so I figured it wouldn't be right to do this video and not pay respects to what is, from what I can tell, the OG beta mod. It was really disappointing to learn that this fragmented series of levels I played in elementary school is still all that exists of the mod though. There's obviously a lot more that leaked back in 2003 than just the Borealis levels. So what's out there today? For an impatient beta fan who's desperate to see the bigger picture of the real, raw, original Half-Life 2? Well, there's always Half-Life 2 Beta Minimalist Mod. Half-Life 2 Beta Minimalist Mod is probably one of the most surreal things I've ever played as a Half-Life fan. It's a quote-unquote minimalist attempt at recreating the earlier drafts of Half-Life 2's story, which in practice means that it's an extremely primitive checklist that technically shows off all the things people fawn over the most about the beta, and is technically playable and finished front to back. It runs on a modified Half-Life 1 engine, it's only about 45 minutes long, its maps are really crude and chock full of really ridiculous voice acting and dialogue. And I'd probably best describe it as a shitpost that both mocks and pays tribute to the beta and its adoring fans. You'll go through all the motions, see all the most talked about scenes and sights from the leak, the weird soldier variants from the concept art, the Combine alien slug thing, the female assassin, sexy beta Alex, Eli Maxwell and Captain Vance as separate characters from before they were merged. If you liked any of the early concept art, you'll be pleased to learn this game often literally copy and paste it into its map skybox textures. A lot of the scenes included in this mod, and indeed most beta mods, are based on Mark Laidlaw's early Half-Life 2 story treatments as seen in the Raising the Bar development book. Minimalist Mod's opening is no exception. Laidlaw's original script describes a G-Man intro where he shows Gordon a surreal, fast-forwarded time-lapse of how the world decayed over 10 years during his absence, before he snaps awake on a train in the real world. Here is Minimalist Mod's take on that.
Gordon, you need to wake up and save City 17.
Afterward, Gordon awakens on a train headed inbound for City 17, catching a shadowy glimpse of a scrapped one-note character named Samuel. Apparently, pretty much all this fellow was supposed to do is tell us to put on a gas mask before we get off the train, because the Combine's industrial pollution of the Earth in the beta world is so intense that you'll cough up bloody foam if you don't put one on. Once we arrive in City 17, we see a big screen displaying an earlier version of Dr. Breen, who some people like to call the Console. I don't think this was ever actually the character's real name per se. From what I can tell, Console was really more of an early title for Breen, a bit like how in the final game he's called the World Administrator. In concept art of the Console's office, you can even see Breen's face and a portrait in the back, and this Console statue model found in the leak is also clearly Breen. So I'm not really sure how much this character we see ever really existed beyond an early concept art sketch, to be honest. Still though, no beta mod is complete without this weird bald guy yapping knockoff 1984 quotes at you.
A true citizen knows that duty is the greatest gift.
Heading through City 17, we see all kinds of ideas lifted right out of the concept art. The trenchcoat Metro Cops, a scrapped Combine factory location apparently named the Stenographer's Chasm, and of course the child slave factories that were scrapped when the team came up with the idea for the suppression field. When we meet up with Kleiner, we see him not only sporting his earlier geriatric man face, but also wearing an eye patch, another reference to one of Mark Laidlaw's early story vignettes. Barney is also blonde, which I can only assume is a reference to IHV Test, some weird censored Barney model apparently found in the leak files. This mod has some truly obscure shit in it. We go through the teleporter sequence in Kleiner's lab, and during the malfunction we catch a glimpse of the original Mossman character Elena in the fabled Kraken base laboratory, and even the Console in the flesh.
Gordon, who are you? get out of the Citadel.
It's at this point Minimalist Mod takes a stab at portraying the events of Mark Laidlaw's old friends story vignette, in which Gordon and his colleagues from Black Mesa hijack a Combine bus and wind up in the middle of a high-octane police chase, before crashing into the canals with Kleiner left critically wounded. It's known for being an early Half-Life 2 outline with a very bleak tone. It's very dramatic. Anyways, here's what Minimalist Mod's rendition looks like.
Gordon, police are everywhere. We gotta get out of here quick. We're gonna crash!
After Barney crashes the bus, we ride jet skis through a canal with him until he unfortunately crashes for a second time. We pretty much never see him again. We find ourselves in this terrible rendition of the coastal wasteland, fighting bull squids and hound eyes until we enter Eli's hideout. The earlier version of Eli we see here, Eli Maxwell, has a sort of steampunk blacksmith look going on, and Dog makes quite an impression as well. Eli's purpose in this version of the story is also quite funny. As told in one of Laidlaw's stories, he was to take the player aside in his hideout, sit them down, and literally narrate what happened between the games in an extended cutscene, while a slideshow with images of the 7-hour war played from a projector.
Gordon, Earth was bright and shiny until that one day when the aliens invaded. The Combine put a citadel in the middle of New York. We shot the Citadel, but it didn't die. The creator of Black Mesa surrendered Earth after 7 minutes. Now they have filled our streets with air and clean skies. We must fight them, Gordon.
Right after the presentation ends, Eli abruptly gets sucked into a portal storm, and we teleport to Ravenholm's scrapped docks, which were seen in E3 2002. Grigori gives us these stupid saw puzzles to jump through, and this is also where I found out this mod has no autosaves. Fuck. No! After Monkey burns to death in his church, we take a brisk walk through the Antlion Caves and briefly get our hands on the Beta sniper rifle. We don't really do much with it in Minimalist Mod, but I just want to say I always thought this weapon design was really cool. At least the one in episode 2 is also cool, I guess. Just a shame we never really got to use it ourselves. Anyways, the next area on the docket is the Depot, a Combine prison chapter connected to Nova Prospect that processes its inmates. How does Minimalist Mod portray a visit to a Combine prison? Well, it's rather simple, actually.
Gordon, you are in prison.
After that, we get on another train to the Air Exchange, the main source of the Combine air pollution that's ravaging Earth's atmosphere, and meet Captain Vance, the other character Eli Maxwell merged with to bring us Eli Vance. Captain Vance was supposed to be the leader of a faction called the Conscripts, basically the remnants of Earth's military forces that were assimilated by the Combine after surrendering at the end of the 7-hour war. Despite nominally working for the Combine, Vance was supposed to be secretly aiding the resistance. A bit like the Borealis workers we saw in Missing Information, waiting for the day an uprising would begin so he could finally turn and lead his men into battle against the Combine once more.
Gordon, where is my daughter? She needs to come home.
It's kind of weird to me that Alex was meant to be Captain Vance's daughter and not Eli Maxwell's. I guess the implication is that Alex's mother must have been black instead of Asian originally. But then again, some of the early models we've seen of Alex almost make it look like they at one point intentionally tried to make her look whiter. Maybe it was to make the two look more related? Your guess is as good as mine. Either way, I'm glad we got the design we had in the end because this version of Alex looks weird as hell. We shatter the core of the Air Exchange, which kind of just looks like a texturing error, beginning the process of bringing clean air back to Earth and signaling the humans in City 17 to begin the uprising. Oh, and we lose Captain Vance in a pretty spectacular death scene.
Gordon, that dropship's coming right for us.
In the final arc of Minimalist Mod, we meet up with old mate Odell aboard his tugboat. Then we immediately get off the tugboat onto the Borealis, which is somehow even smaller than the tugboat, and then promptly escape the Borealis on a submarine, technically picking up where Missing Information story left off. There's also this ridiculous cutscene of our weird-ass Gordon character wiggling around on the submarine while Triage at Dawn plays. When we arrive at Kraken Base, it turns out Elena Mossman sabotaged the place by calling the Combine to come clear it out with stalkers. And she's now escaped to the Citadel, having been a double agent just like the Mossman in the final game was. She never gets a redemption arc like Judith did though. After escaping Kraken Base in a second submarine, we abruptly fade into this huge Arctic battle zone with tanks, shooting down gunships with a rocket launcher. I believe this is supposed to be a rendition of another one of the game's early story treatments, the conscripts' march on the weather control facility, a somewhat obscure scrapped location with a similar purpose to the air exchange. Once we take care of the gunships, we meet up with Beta Alex for the first time.
Gordon, we need to get to the aeroplane.
Minimalist Mod's depiction of the weather control dome is pretty laughable. We never saw any concept art of this place, but I have a feeling it wasn't meant to look like a big concrete hamburger bun. Anyways, we board the airplane with Alex, and you know what comes next. We crash land into the skyscraper from the scrapped Vertigo chapter, leaving Alex gravely injured.
Gordon, I'm hurt. Can't move. Go on without me. Find my father. There's an emergency bunker near the inner gate. He's in command there. Tell him that
Now, unlike most lines heard in this mod, this is a real voice line found in the leak. Do notice that she's asking us to go find her father, Captain Vance, even though he's supposed to be dead. This is because his death scene earlier with the dropship was completely made up by the mod authors, which really only makes it all the funnier. After taking a very convenient elevator trip down to the city rooftops and clearing out some more beta stalkers, we descend onto the streets to meet up with the rest of the rebellion.
Get your free TVs!
Since the last time I mentioned the free TVs meme in a video, Valve actually released a recovered copy of the lost SIGGRAPH demo it originates from, which is quite neat. I suppose modern Valve isn't all bad. We meet up with the conscripts who are trying to rescue Captain Vance from his bunker. That death scene they added in earlier really fucks up the story, huh? We also encounter the Cut Hydra enemy, since it was in one of the famous E3 trailers and looked cool. And although this scene looks terrible, I am slightly impressed they managed to stage it in the Half-Life 1 engine at all. We breach the outer wall and enter the early Citadel, which is pretty cool in the concept art, but in Minimalist Mod basically resembles a liminal space public bathroom. And it's here we have our final showdown in the console's office. Honestly, not a terrible recreation, all things considered. At this point, Minimalist Mod gives you a choice to either fight the console or side with him. I think this scene is meant to be based on this concept art where we can see Elena holding Alex at gunpoint. I have no idea what the console is tapping on or why Odell is here. If you press the red button to join the evil Combine, the console is delighted to have you. If you press the green button to fight for the future of humanity, you get the dramatic reveal that the console is actually an augmented slug freak who you now have to fight. It's really weird to me that Valve couldn't get this idea of Breen being a slug out of their heads. It's an idea that apparently persisted even after Half-Life 2's release into the development of Half-Life 3. Once you kill the console once and for all, the British voice of a developer thanks you for playing his mod, as everything fades to black and Minimalist Mod comes to a close. I recommend trying this mod out yourself if you get the time. It's more entertaining than I can give justice to. The way it's written and acted out reminds me of those old Half-Life Full Life Consequences videos. It also does genuinely offer something no other mod really does. Not just a scattered bunch of cut concepts, but a surprisingly comprehensive attempt at telling the full story arc of early Half-Life 2. Even if it is silly and takes its own creative liberties. Somewhere buried deep within this shitpost is the ghost of a different Half-Life 2. Minimalist Mod is essentially a surreal, self-aware, and absurdist parody of the online Half-Life 2 beta culture, stringing up all these beloved ideas to show you how little they really mean on their own. And it's also clearly taking the piss out of beta mods in general. A punchline about the long list of Half-Life 2 beta mods that never get finished and stay in development hell. It gives it a funny mythology. Half-Life 2 Beta Minimalist Mod, the only Half-Life 2 beta mod ever completed. Getting back to a more serious note though, there are two mods I know of that are genuine high-effort attempts at building a new campaign out of the ideas from Half-Life 2's early development. The first is Raising the Bar Redux. Now, I would talk more about RTBR, but its creators appear to have banned me from their Discord, which I'll take as a sign they don't really want me covering their mod. The second Big League Beta remake is Dark Interval, which has been in development for over 15 years now. Dark Interval originally began development on April 10th, 2010, and was created by C.Marti, who, from what I can tell, is a respected and talented modder in the Half-Life community. I've played some of his other mods before, it's clear from them that he meticulously studies these games. But it seems Dark Interval is C.Vox's magnum opus, and it might even be the best beta mod I've ever played. It took me around 4.5 hours to finish it, and by the end it left me genuinely stunned. It's the first mod that's given me a real taste of what a completed Half-Life 2 beta might have felt like, something I've been yearning for since I was a kid. It makes an awesome first impression. The mod's main menu is a very snazzy rendition of the iconic menu the game originally leaked with back in 2003. It also takes its name from the ambient track that plays during the final scene of Episode 2. When you think about it, the name basically just means a dark time, so it's pretty fitting for a more dramatic, dark and gritty take on the Half-Life 2 world. The campaign itself begins in a dream sequence set in the Arctic, before we wake up out of a cryostasis chamber back aboard a ship called, you guessed it, the Borealis. In Dark Interval, the Borealis is simply a Combine research vessel that seems to have a bit of a headcrab problem, but the mod does also seem to play around with the idea that the ship may still have time-shifting qualities like they planned in Half-Life 3, which makes for a pretty trippy and meta intro. There's quite a lot of great atmosphere here, and it's genuinely fun to use physics props and flares to clear through puzzles and enemies. Once we meet up with our good old friend Odell, he helps us sneak off the ship into City 17. Boarding the docks of the city, things start getting more familiar. We see cremators carrying their flamethrowers, or immolators, and Barney picks us out of the crowd of citizens. The voice acting in this mod is also pretty good for what it is, but I can't help but notice Barney does kind of sound like a South Park character.
Still, have to meet my beating quota.
Barney dismisses us into the industrial part of the city where we come across a couple of vorticells, a scrap type of Combine power station that would siphon energy from captured vortigaunts. After we free 2 vorts from their capture, they accompany us and help us deal with some puzzles and combat underground. It's a bit like that part in the mines in Episode 2. We even get to pick up a cremator's immolator and clear out alien Zen outbreaks in the sewers and streets. Dark Interval's depiction of the stenographer's chasm thankfully does the concept art more justice than Minimalist Mods did. While I was playing, I couldn't help but notice the ominous Combine propaganda posters all over the city. These are of course based on designs from the game's early development, but the mod has remade them to depict the Combine designs from the final game, which is a really cool touch. Apparently Valve cut these original posters because they thought they were too unsubtle, that they were, quote, doing the work of a sledgehammer where tweezers were required. Now I can see what they mean, but there's no denying these posters were really stylish, and Dark Interval does an excellent job bringing them back into the fold. Dr. Breen is referred to as the console instead of the world administrator, but otherwise looks and sounds exactly the same, which I think is probably the more accurate way to handle him in a project like this. He's also broadcasted via an earlier, more interesting variant of the Breencast monitors, described by the game's original artists as cluster-like compounds. It's a cool piece of Combine tech I'm happy to see brought to life. The propaganda art of Breen shows him sporting all kinds of different Star Trek-looking uniforms, and it looks like the Dark Interval team even faithfully remade the art faintly seen in the background of the old console office concept art, which is really cool. Again, the artists on this mod really knocked it out of the park. Once we meet up with Barney in the back of a train station plaza, he sends us through the quarantine sector, a cordoned off part of City 17, infested with head crabs and other Zen animals. Since this quarantine sector area isn't directly based on any actual Half-Life 2 concepts, it's easy to assume that it's a reference to the quarantine zone from Half-Life Alyx. But it turns out Dark Interval actually came up with the idea first, which is strange. I guess it's not that crazy since Half-Life Alyx drew from the beta pretty heavily too. Apparently cremators were even meant to make an appearance at one point. Anywho, we rescue a worker stuck in the quarantine zone and put down his zombified coworkers, then head back into the city and see soldiers marching through the streets. I wish we saw the Combine marching in formation, demonstrating their scale and discipline as a military force like this more often. We only saw it in the final game, what, once? Twice if you count the episodes?
Originally, the flying manhacks were intended to be under the control of game-playing citizens who believed they were playing a video game rather than hunting fugitive citizens. Like many early gameplay ideas, it sounded good on paper, but proved to be overly complex and not very fun.
The last thing we do on our way to Kleiner is check out the Hackman building, which there are posters for all around the city. It's a rendition of the scrapped Manhack arcade concept, even including an actual minigame you can walk up and play. It's a little bit clunky and unstable, but I'm not sure I've seen any other mod bring this idea to life quite this well. Kleiner's lab looks really cool. It's got the original teleporter design seen in the concept art, and when it malfunctions, we catch glimpses of Vortigaunts and Zen and the scientist crew at Kraken Base. And Kleiner is left injured with this unique scuffed up face texture. The game finally really opens up when you enter the canals. Dark Interval's level design is less linear than Half-Life 2's, meaning most combat arenas are very big and open, and there's an even bigger sense of scale to Gordon's journey. You'll navigate over rooftops and through underground tunnel systems, fighting all kinds of new and obscure alien enemies returning from Half-Life 1 and the beta concept art. Floaters, tripod hoppers, stingers, all kinds of weird Zen alien flora everywhere like the Zen healing pools and light stalks. We even see different types of hound eyes and aquatic bull squids. I only wish they used the official 2004 bull squid design instead. I've always really liked it. There's of course cremators, the badass red elite metro cops, gas emitting scanners, and even the Hydra, which isn't the most amazing enemy, but it's still pretty exciting to finally fight them one-on-one. You come across them in this little lair of theirs, and and it's neat to see them pick off head crabs and fling props at you. You can tell this mod was made by a real diehard Half-Life fan, because they even bring back the fucking Zen Protozoan. Yeah, that weird floating orb thing from the Resonance Cascade, I bet a lot of you didn't even know that thing had a name. Outside of new enemies, some other obvious gameplay tweaks Dark Interval introduces are shooting while zoomed in, cooking grenades, and even killing friendly citizens. In fact, you might even want to kill them because some of them are kinda dicks.
Piss off.
The mod addresses a lot of reservations Half-Life 1 purists had about Half-Life 2. It alters the gameplay to be more open-ended and maybe a little bit more skill-based. Between that and all the Zen stuff everywhere, Dark Interval definitely feels more tied to Half-Life 1 than its real sequel does. It's obvious there was great care put into making all the visuals in this mod feel authentic. The ramshackle rebel hideouts you come across especially feel like believable parts of the Half-Life 2 universe. Furthermore, it's really cool how much the mod humanizes the citizens. There's this brief run-in you have with a set of rebels living in a cove led by this guy in a fisherman hat, and you see people in their kitchen preparing head crabs to eat.
If you see any buckets standing under blue bubbles, don't knock them down. They're for collecting drinking water.
The second part of the canals are just gorgeous. Dark Interval does such a good job bringing the early concept art to life here. And if that's not enough for you, rather than driving an airboat, you commandeer an APC from a Metro cop after he dies to a Hydra. I personally never had a problem with the original game's airboat sequence, but I can't deny it's a lot cooler to spray bullets and missiles out of this hot rod. The main antagonist of the canals is this really intense guy named Commander Falconbury. His name is a reference to opposing force, and it's heavily implied this guy used to be with the HECU, which is one thing about this mod I'm not sure how I feel about, to be honest. This kind of failed HECU revenge storyline feels kind of tainted by Hunt Down the Freeman to me, but it doesn't overstay its welcome, and I suppose it is a little bit more interesting than just a regular helicopter fight. The last part of the mod after we escape the canals is the wastelands, which are just bustling with beautiful scenery and all kinds of overgrown Zen wildlife. This part really does justice to how you might imagine the areas outside of City 17 looking, and it's very fun to explore. Once we finish off a couple of crab scents, the mod begins wrapping up with us getting rejected from a series of Rebel and Vortigaunt camps, before eventually winding up outside the wasteland hideout of this guy.
So, Golden Freeman. You can call me Eli. Simply Eli. No second names, no monikers, no inquiries.
This is an interesting way to handle Eli's character being split. This guy's name is Eli, and he has Dog with him, but he's a completely original design with a face that more closely resembles Captain Vance's. I think the mod is reveling in confusing the player here, which is interesting. Eli's custom model is probably the most out-of-place looking asset in the entire mod, aside from maybe the restored cut female citizen head. It doesn't quite look like Half-Life 2 to me, but it is close. It feels like a character out of some other mid to late 2000s game, maybe Killing Floor. Eli's base setup here is pretty fascinating too. You can look around and find all kinds of little bits of world building and lore laying around, and I think they did a good job of bringing the moody concept art to life here. Everything ends on a very strange note. You take your HEV suit off and sleep overnight here at Eli's place. You wake up and catch him messing with your stuff, and he even gives you a slideshow like in Minimalist Mod. The Dark Interval team actually did their best with it though. There's some nifty visuals of head crabs in the real world and Breen on Joe Rogan or something. After a gravity gun tutorial, a portal storm randomly appears and sucks us into it, and that is where the mod ends. Despite the abrupt ending and being unfinished, this mod has some moments where it genuinely borders on capturing that golden age Valve magic. If you're looking for beta atmosphere, this mod delivers. It's got great skylines to admire, a great soundtrack, distinct and moody lighting. It feels like early Half-Life 2. It has that brooding, oppressive atmosphere. It's impressive that it doesn't rely on some of the more obvious beta cliches. No flashy stormtrooper metro cops or 1984 bald guy, no sexy skin suit Alex, hell, no Alex at all so far. And even as someone who thinks Half-Life 2 is the best game in the series, I think there may just be some things that Dark Interval does even better. Seavox has been at this for a while, and it shows. Even if we never see what comes of missing information, as far as I'm concerned, Dark Interval has stepped up and snatched the torch. And what they've done with it so far is just fantastic. So I encourage you to go join the Dark Interval Discord and go show the mod some love and support. I can't recommend the thing enough. This is the one beta mod I really want to see finished. But there's really so many more out there. I could go on, I really could. I've only scratched the surface with this stuff. There are so many mods I simply don't have the time to analyze. Terminus, Coterminus, Cremation, the Axle Project, Hyper, Beyond the Bar, Project City 17, Insolence Build 2001, the countless Gmod maps based on the beta. There is so much. And I'm sure plenty of them have their own unique quirks and charms that make them worth playing, but this video is already way longer than I meant it to be. So for now, that's where this journey is going to have to end. Of course, course, if you want only the most legitimate beta experience, the most authentic thing you can do is go check out the original 2003 files, which have been touched up and maintained by modders for the last 20 years in what's referred to as the Half-Life 2 Beta mega build. This is pretty much the root of everything. A mega patch of the original leaked files from 2003, repackaged with all kinds of fixes and even carrying an entire leak modding scene of its own. It's inconvenient to download, it's hosted on an ancient Russian website, it's got a huge file size, it crashes all the fucking time, it's illegal, and it isn't even anything remotely resembling a coherent experience. If you want to play it, you will pretty much just be loading scattered unfinished map files through the console. But it is the most authentic way to explore the Half-Life 2 beta today. And the people behind it have updated it as recently as a few months ago. In fact, I think in a way the unfinished jankiness is one of the main appeals of the beta and what draws people to make projects like these. People view the leaked files as a more indie, unsanitized, purer vision of the project, and it inspires them to be creative and make their own indie projects too. One multi-billion-dollar game company's trash is another autistic teenager's treasure. But hopefully with the 3 mods I've shown you today, I've given you a good taste of what the beta modding scene has to offer. Aura and cool vibes, memes, and genuine masterpiece tributes to one of the greatest games of all time. And speaking of tributes, regardless of whether you're a feral freak like me who defends the final game to an unhealthy degree, or you're this guy on Reddit cosplaying as the beta gas mask citizen, we should all be able to come together to say rest in peace to Viktor Antonov. His work on this game was nothing short of legendary. I don't think he ever knew how much he and his designs inspired all of us. Thank you to C.Marti for helping out with this video. Thank you for watching. If you want to see videos like this more often, you can help by subscribing to the channel and supporting me on Patreon. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed and have a good day.